Commander Velrax circled Daehyun slowly, all four of his eyes focused on the weapon in the human's hand. His sensory appendages twitched and scanned, analyzing every detail. The other Vrelnath officers in the observation galleries leaned forward, their armor plates clicking softly as they shifted position. "Show me," Velrax commanded. Daehyun held up the shank. In the harsh lighting of the arena, it looked almost primitive. The sharpened plastic caught the light. The wrapped fabric grip showed the wear from his practice thrusts. It was nothing impressive by galactic standards. Armies across the galaxy carried plasma weapons, molecular blades, and gravity hammers. This was just shaped plastic, but the Vrelnath weren't laughing anymore. They were watching with something that might have been curiosity or concern. "This is what you made?" Velrax reached out with one of his hands, gesturing for Daehyun to give him the weapon. "This is your answer to my challenge?" Daehyun handed it over. Velrax examined it carefully, turning it over with his clawed fingers. He tested the point against his armored palm, and was surprised when it actually scratched the surface. Not deep, but enough to leave a mark. His sensory appendages focused on that scratch with intense interest. "You sharpened plastic," Velrax said. His translator made the words sound almost confused. "You took a hygiene tool and transformed its purpose." "How?" "Friction, heat, and patience," Daehyun answered. The concrete floor provided an abrasive surface. The scraping motion generated heat that softened the plastic. I shaped it while it was warm, let it cool in the new form, then repeated the process hundreds of times until it reached the current state. Velrax looked up from the weapon to Daehyun's hands. They were covered in small burns and cuts from the work. "You injured yourself making this. Pain is temporary," Daehyun said. "Death is permanent. I chose the option that let me survive." The Vrelnath commander made a sound that the translator didn't bother to interpret. He held up the shank for all the observers to see. "This human used only the materials we provided. Nothing else. In 6 hours he created a functional weapon from refuse." Murmuring spread through the observation galleries. The Vrelnath officers were talking among themselves, their guttural language mixing with the clicking of their armor plates. Velrax focused his attention back on Daehyun. "But a weapon is only useful if the wielder knows how to use it. Demonstrate. Show me the technique you would employ." This was the real test. Daehyun had known it was coming. Making the weapon was only half the challenge. He needed to prove he could actually use it against a Vrelnath. "I'll need a target," Daehyun said. "Use me," Velrax replied immediately. Silence fell across the arena. Even the murmuring stopped. A human attacking a Vrelnath commander? This was unheard of. This was either going to be very interesting or very short. Daehyun took the shank back from Velrax and stepped back to create distance. His heart was pounding, but he kept his breathing steady. Everything Sora had told him ran through his mind. Feint high, strike low. Use their size against them. Don't go for the obvious targets. "You asked for a deadly weapon," Daehyun said, his voice carrying across the silent arena. "You asked what makes humans dangerous. Let me explain something about my species before I demonstrate." He began to move slowly to the side, and Velrax turned to track him. Good. The alien was engaged, watching. "Humans don't have claws," Daehyun continued. "We don't have armor plating or venom or enhanced senses. When we evolved on Earth, we were prey. Everything wanted to eat us. Big cats with teeth like knives, bears with claws that could tear us apart, snakes with poison, birds with talons. We should have gone extinct." He shifted his grip on the shank, holding it in a reverse grip now, blade pointing down from the bottom of his fist, a different attack angle. "But we didn't go extinct," Daehyun said. "Want to know why? Because we learned to make everything into a weapon. A rock became a hammer. A stick became a spear. Fire became a tool for cooking and warmth and keeping predators away. Every single thing we touched, we asked ourselves, how can this help me survive?" Velrax's sensory appendages were focused entirely on Daehyun now. The alien was listening, truly listening. "This toothbrush is just the latest in a long line of improvised weapons," Daehyun explained. "Thousands of years ago, my ancestors sharpened stones into knives. Hundreds of years ago, human prisoners turned spoons into lockpicks and bedsheets into ropes. Decades ago, soldiers in wars made bombs from fertilizer and launched them from pipes." He demonstrated a quick thrust toward Velrax's midsection, stopping just short of contact. The Vrelnath commander didn't flinch, but his stance shifted slightly, an unconscious defensive response. "The weapon isn't the toothbrush," Daehyun said, withdrawing the thrust. The weapon is the human mind that looked at the toothbrush and saw potential. That's what makes us dangerous. Not what we have, but what we can imagine, what we can create. He moved again, this time showing how he would target the gaps in Vrelnath armor. A quick strike toward the armpit joint, a thrust aimed at the neck gap, a slash toward the sensory appendages that would disable their scanning ability. You want to know if humans deserve respect in this galaxy? Daehyun asked. Here's what you should understand. You gave me 6 hours and a toothbrush. I gave you a weapon. Imagine what humans could do with 6 months and access to a forge. We'd build you an army. Give us 6 years in a laboratory and we'd create weapons that could reshape planets. He demonstrated one final move. A complex combination that involved a feint toward the head, a drop to one knee, and a thrust upward toward the unarmored underside of Velrax's jaw. Again, he stopped just short of contact. This isn't about whether I could kill you with this shank, Daehyun said, standing back up. Maybe I could, maybe I couldn't. In a real fight, you're bigger and stronger. You'd probably win. He held up the shank between them. But the question you should be asking isn't whether this weapon can hurt you. The question is, what happens when there are a billion humans all with the same creative mindset, all working together to solve the problem of fighting the Vrelnath Empire? Daehyun lowered the weapon. We'd find a way. We always do. That's the human difference. That's why we've survived every extinction event, every war, every disaster our planet threw at us. We adapt, we innovate. We turn toothbrushes into shanks, and then we turn shanks into something worse. The arena was completely silent. Hundreds of Vrelnath warriors watched this single human standing before their commander, holding a piece of sharpened plastic and making claims that should have sounded absurd, but somehow didn't. Velrax stared at Daehyun for a long moment. Then the commander turned to address the assembled officers in the galleries. This demonstration is concluded, Velrax announced in his own language, the translator catching up a moment later. Return the human to his cell. Continue observation protocols. The guards moved forward to take Daehyun away, but Velrax held up one hand to stop them. The commander turned back to face the human. You have proven your point, Velrax said quietly in a tone only Daehyun could hear. This is not the response we expected. Humans are more complex than our intelligence suggested. Will you let us go? Daehyun asked, knowing the answer already but hoping anyway. That is not my decision to make, Velrax replied. But I will be making a report to the High Command. What happens next will depend on what they decide about your species. The commander gestured to the guards, who grabbed Daehyun and pulled him toward the exit. As they dragged him away, Daehyun heard Velrax give another order. Secure that weapon. I want our scientists to analyze it and pull all historical data on human warfare. I want to know everything about how they fight. Back in the corridors, being pulled back to his cell, Daehyun allowed himself a small smile. He had done it. He had shown them that humans weren't prey. He had planted a seed of doubt in their minds. Whether that seed would grow into respect or fear, he didn't know. But it was something. It was a start. The guards threw him back into his cell and reactivated the force field. The moment they left, the voices of the other prisoners erupted through the walls. That was incredible, Hyun shouted. You actually made them think, Jisoo added, amazement in her voice. Captain Sora's voice was warm with approval. Well done, Corporal. You represented humanity well. Daehyun sat down on his sleeping pad, exhausted. His hands still hurt from making the weapon. His muscles ached from the tension of the demonstration. But he felt something he hadn't felt since being captured. Hope. 2 days passed in the cell. Daehyun learned the rhythm of the prison ship quickly. The lights dimmed every 12 hours for what the Vrelnath considered a sleep cycle. Guard drones patrolled every 45 minutes, scanning cells with red laser eyes that swept back and forth. Food came through a slot in the wall twice per cycle, some kind of gray paste that tasted like nothing but kept him alive. During the dark periods, the other prisoners whispered to each other through the walls. Sora had been planning an escape for weeks, but it required all of them to be in the same place at the same time, which never happened. The Vrelnath kept them separated. Hyun had been studying the guard drone patterns and thought he found a weakness in their sensor grid. Jisoo just wanted everyone to stay healthy and alive until an opportunity came. Daehyun contributed what little he knew about the ship's layout from his brief unconscious journey to the cells. It wasn't much, but every piece of information mattered. On the third day, the force field to his cell deactivated with a sharp buzzing sound. Before Daehyun could react, 3 Vrelnath guards entered. They didn't say anything, just grabbed him with their strong arms and pulled him out into the corridor. "Where are you taking him?" Jisoo called out from her cell. The guards ignored her. They dragged Daehyun down the corridor, his feet barely touching the ground. He tried not to struggle. Captain Sora's advice echoed in his mind. Don't waste energy fighting when you can't win. Save your strength for when it matters. The guards pulled him through a series of corridors that all looked the same. Metal walls, blue lighting, that constant humming sound. After several minutes, they reached a large door that split open with a hiss. The room beyond was huge. It was an arena. That was the only word for it. The space was oval-shaped, about 50 meters across, with a high ceiling that disappeared into darkness. The floor was made of some kind of rough material that looked like stone. Around the edges, rising up in tiers, were observation platforms filled with Vrelnath officers. Dozens of them, all watching with those glowing red eyes. The guards threw Daehyun into the center of the arena and stepped back. He stumbled but caught his balance, spinning around to see where they went. The guards had retreated to the edges, blocking any exit. Commander Velrax descended from one of the observation platforms on some kind of gravity lift. He landed heavily in the arena, his chitinous armor plates clicking together as he moved. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Daehyun barely came up to the alien's chest. "Corporal Daehyun Kim," Velrax said, his translator making his voice boom across the arena. "You have been brought here for evaluation. Your species claims to be warriors, claims to have fought wars across your entire planet, claims to deserve respect and territory." The Vrelnath commander walked in a slow circle around Daehyun, his sensory appendages twitching and scanning. "We have tested many species. Most are weak. They beg for mercy. They offer to serve us in exchange for their lives. Some fight with tooth and claw, but they are simple creatures. Predictable." Velrax stopped circling and stood directly in front of Daehyun. "We want to understand humans. What makes you dangerous? What makes you think you can survive in a galaxy where you have no natural weapons, no armor, no speed or strength advantage?" From somewhere in his armor, Velrax produced a small object and tossed it at Daehyun's feet. It bounced once and settled on the stone floor. A toothbrush. The same white plastic toothbrush that sat on his sleeping pad in the cell. "This is what we give you," Velrax announced, his voice echoing to all the watching aliens. "This is all your species deserves. A soft tool for soft creatures. Now, human, I give you a challenge." The arena fell silent. Every Vrelnath officer leaned forward, watching. "Show me your weapon," Velrax commanded. "Show me the deadliest thing a human can create. Prove to me that your species is more than prey. You have this pathetic object. Make it dangerous. Make it something that would give a Vrelnath warrior pause." Laughter erupted from the observation platforms. The sound was horrible, like machinery breaking apart. The Vrelnath officers were enjoying this. It was entertainment to them. They expected Daehyun to fail, to prove that humans were as weak and useless as they believed. Daehyun looked down at the toothbrush. His mind raced. This was a test, obviously. But what kind of test? What did they want to see? If he tried to attack Velrax with the toothbrush as it was, he would fail. The plastic would break against the alien's armor. He would look foolish and weak, but if he did nothing, he would also fail. The Vrelnath would see him as a coward, too afraid to even try. There was a third option, though. An option that came from deep in human history, from the stories his training instructor had told. Sergeant Minjae had served in the border conflicts before retiring to teach. He had told stories about prisoners of war, about soldiers trapped behind enemy lines, about civilians who survived against impossible odds. The stories all had one thing in common. Humans didn't need to be given weapons. They made weapons. From anything. From nothing. Daehyun bent down and picked up the toothbrush. He held it up, examining it in the light. The handle was about 6 inches long, made of hard plastic. The bristles were synthetic fibers. It was designed to clean teeth, nothing more. But in human hands, everything could become something else. "You want to see a weapon?" Daehyun said, his voice carrying across the silent arena. "You want to see what makes humans dangerous?" Velrax tilted his head, sensory appendages focusing on Daehyun with intense interest. "Yes, show me." "I need time," Daehyun said. "Time?" The Vrelnath commander's translator made the word sound confused. "For what?" "To make it," Daehyun explained. "You asked for the deadliest thing a human can create. Creation takes time. Give me 6 hours and I'll show you exactly what you asked for." The arena erupted in more laughter. The Vrelnath officers were practically howling with amusement. What could this human possibly do with 6 hours and a toothbrush? It was absurd. It was pathetic. But Velrax wasn't laughing. He was studying Daehyun with those glowing eyes, his sensory appendages moving in patterns that suggested deep thought. This was unexpected. Humans were supposed to be simple, direct, easy to understand. This one was doing something different. You claim you can make this object dangerous, Velrax said slowly. You claim that time and human creativity will transform this harmless tool into something that would concern a warrior of the Vrelnath Empire. Yes, Daehyun said simply. Velrax was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a gesture with one of his 4 arms. Very well. I grant you 6 hours. Return this human to his cell. Give him nothing else. No tools, no materials, nothing but what he already has. In 6 hours we return here, and he will demonstrate his weapon. If he fails, if this is merely a delay tactic, his punishment will be severe. The guards grabbed Daehyun again and dragged him out of the arena. As they pulled him through the door, he heard Velrax speaking to the other officers. Increase monitoring of the human cell. I want to see everything he does. If this is human deception, we will learn from it. If this is human capability, we will also learn from it. Either way, this test continues. Back in his cell, the force field reactivated behind him. Daehyun stood in the center of the small room, holding the toothbrush. 6 hours. He had bought himself 6 hours. Now came the hard part. He actually had to deliver on his promise. What did you do? Jisu's voice came through the wall, urgent and worried. We heard everything through the monitoring system. They're broadcasting it to all the detention cells. Daehyun, what are you planning? Something crazy, Daehyun admitted, looking at the toothbrush in his hand. Something human. From down the corridor, Captain Sora's voice called out. Then you better get started. 6 hours isn't much time. Whatever you're doing, we'll help however we can. Daehyun sat down on the floor near the corner where the wall met the ground. The corner was rough concrete, probably the foundation layer before they added the metal plating. Rough enough to grind plastic, he pressed the toothbrush handle against the concrete and began to scrape. The sound echoed through the cell. Scrape, scrape, scrape. In the observation rooms throughout the ship, Vrelnath officers gathered to watch. This human had made a bold claim. Now they would see if he could back it up. None of them truly believed he could, but they were curious enough to watch anyway. And that curiosity, though none of them knew it yet, was the first crack in the Vrelnath Empire's certainty about human weakness. The cold metal floor pressed against Daehyun Kim's face as consciousness slowly returned to him. His head throbbed with a dull, persistent ache that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the strange humming sound filling the air. He tried to move his arms, but his muscles felt weak and unresponsive. Everything hurt. Where was he? Slowly, carefully, Daehyun pushed himself up to a sitting position. The room spun for a moment before his vision cleared. He was in a cell. The walls were smooth and metallic, glowing with a faint blue light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. There were no windows, no doors that he could see. Just 4 walls and a force field shimmering across what must be the entrance. The last thing he remembered was his shuttle. He had been running a routine reconnaissance mission near the Helios expanse, checking for unusual energy readings. Then the alarms had started screaming. His systems had gone dark. Something had grabbed his ship with a force he couldn't fight against. After that, nothing but darkness. Daehyun touched his uniform. They had left him his clothes, at least. Standard-issue Terran Defense Corps jumpsuit, though his equipment belt was gone. No weapons, no comm device, no emergency beacon. He was alone. You're awake. The voice came from beyond the force field. Daehyun's head snapped up. A woman stood in the corridor outside his cell. She wore the same TDC uniform he did, though hers was more wrinkled and dirty. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her face showed the tired lines of someone who hadn't slept well in days. Who are you? Daehyun asked, standing up slowly. His legs wobbled but held. Lieutenant Jisu Park, combat medic, she said. Welcome to hell, Corporal. I saw your rank patch. They brought you in 3 days ago while you were still unconscious. 3 days? Daehyun felt his stomach turn. Where are we? Vrelnath prison ship called the Crimson Dominion, Jisu answered. Her voice was flat, like she had said these words many times before. We're somewhere in disputed space. The Vrelnath have been picking up human ships for the past few months. Some kind of study, we think. Daehyun had heard of the Vrelnath. Everyone in the Defense Corps had. They were a warrior species that had been expanding their empire for centuries. Big, strong, and mean. Humanity had tried to avoid conflict with them, but the Vrelnath kept pushing into human space, testing boundaries, taking what they wanted. How many of us are there? Daehyun moved closer to the force field. He could feel the heat radiating from it. 4 now, counting you, Jisoo said. She pointed down the corridor. Private Hyun Lee is 2 cells down. Young kid, engineer. Got caught when his repair station was raided. And Captain Sora Choi, veteran pilot. She's been here the longest, about 2 months. What do they want with us? Jisoo's expression darkened. They're studying us, trying to figure out if humans are worth worrying about or if we're just easy prey. They've been doing tests. Nothing too harsh yet, mostly just watching us, measuring our reactions to things. But I've heard rumors from some of the other prisoners who were here before. Other prisoners? They're gone now, Jisoo said quietly. The Vrelnath moved them somewhere else, or... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Before Daehyun could ask more questions, a sound echoed through the corridor. Heavy footsteps, multiple sets getting closer. Jisoo's face went pale. Stay calm, she whispered quickly. Don't show fear. They feed on it. The footsteps stopped just outside the corridor junction. Then they appeared. Daehyun had seen pictures of the Vrelnath in training briefings, but nothing prepared him for seeing one in person. The creature was massive, nearly 8 feet tall, with a body covered in dark chitinous plates that looked like natural armor. Its head was angular and harsh, with multiple sensory appendages that moved independently, twitching and scanning the environment. 4 arms, each ending in 3-fingered hands with claws. Eyes that glowed with a reddish light. 3 of them entered the corridor. The one in front had more elaborate armor plating and wore what looked like rank insignia on its chest. This one stopped directly in front of Daehyun's cell and stared at him with those unnerving glowing eyes. The new specimen is awake, the creature said. Its voice came from a translator device that turned its guttural sounds into flat, emotionless English. Human, Terran Defense Corps, scout class vessel, captured in neutral territory. Daehyun forced himself to stand straight and meet those alien eyes. I am Corporal Daehyun Kim, serial number... Your designation is irrelevant, the Vrelnath interrupted. I am Commander Velrak, security chief of this vessel. You are here for evaluation. Your species claims to be worthy of respect, worthy of territory rights in this sector. We will determine if this claim has merit. We don't need your permission to exist, Daehyun said, keeping his voice steady despite the fear crawling up his spine. Velrax made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. It sounded like metal scraping against stone. Courage from prey. Interesting, this is why we study you. To understand what makes you think you can stand against the Vrelnath Empire. The alien commander gestured to his subordinates. Continue standard observation protocols. This one will be tested soon. I want to see what humans do when they believe they are about to die. With that, Velrax and his guards turned and walked away, their heavy footsteps echoing down the metal corridor until they faded into silence. Daehyun let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. His hands were shaking and he clenched them into fists to make them stop. You did well, Jisoo said from outside his cell. Most people can't even speak the first time they see a Vrelnath up close. I wanted to run, Daehyun admitted. We all do, came a new voice. A young man appeared in the corridor, pressing his face near the force field of another cell. He looked barely old enough to be in the military with wide, nervous eyes. I'm Hyun, the engineer Jisoo mentioned. Daehyun, he replied. Listen, new guy, Hyun continued, his voice quick and anxious. Whatever they make you do in the test, just survive. Don't try to be a hero. Don't try to fight back. Just survive and come back here. We're working on something. A way to maybe get out of here, but we need everyone alive for it to work. What kind of way? Daehyun asked. Before Hyun could answer, another voice called out from further down the corridor. This one was older, firmer, with the tone of someone used to giving orders. Enough talk for now. Guard drones will be making rounds soon, and they report unusual activity. Everyone rest while you can. Daehyun, welcome to the Crimson Dominion. I'm Captain Sora Choi. We'll talk more later when it's safer. The corridor fell silent after that. Daehyun sat back down on the cold floor of his cell and tried to process everything. He was a prisoner on an alien warship. His chances of rescue were slim to none. The Vrelnath wanted to test him, to see if humans were worth exterminating or just enslaving. But he wasn't alone. There were others here, other humans. And they were planning something. Daehyun looked around his cell more carefully. There was nothing in here except a small washroom unit in the corner and a sleeping pad on the floor. On the pad sat a single object that he hadn't noticed before. A toothbrush. Plain white plastic, basic design exactly like the ones issued on every TDC ship and station. He picked it up and turned it over in his hands. It was almost funny. The Vrelnath had taken everything from him except this. A simple toothbrush. Daehyun didn't know it yet, but this small piece of plastic would become the most important thing in his life. It would become a message, a symbol, and a weapon. But first he had to survive whatever test the Vrelnath had planned for him. Commander Velrak stood alone in his private quarters, the sharpened toothbrush laid out on the desk before him. The ship's lights had dimmed to night cycle, but he couldn't rest. His mind kept replaying the demonstration in the arena. The human's words, the weapon, the implications. He activated his terminal and began pulling files from the Vrelnath intelligence database. Information about humanity. There wasn't much. The species was new to the galactic community, barely a few generations beyond their home planet. They had developed faster than light travel only 70 years ago. In galactic terms, they were infants, but what they lacked in time they seemed to make up for in innovation. Velrax read through the reports. Human history was a catalog of violence and survival. They had fought each other for thousands of years, developing increasingly sophisticated ways to kill. Their entire planet had nearly destroyed itself multiple times through wars and weapons of mass destruction. Yet they had survived. More than survived. They had thrived. Every conflict showed the same pattern. Humans adapted. When facing superior enemies, they invented new tactics. When deprived of resources, they improvised. When trapped, they escaped. It was relentless. One file caught his attention. A report from a Vrelnath scout who had observed a human mining colony under siege by raiders. The colonists had no military weapons, no defenses. They were civilians. But they had survived a 3-week siege by turning their mining equipment into weapons. Excavation charges became bombs. Drilling lasers became anti-personnel tools. Earth-moving vehicles became armored transports. The raiders had eventually retreated, unable to break colonists who kept finding new ways to fight back. Velrax felt something unfamiliar. Concern. Real. Genuine concern. The Vrelnath Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds over the past 1,000 years. They were the dominant military force in this sector of space, but their success came from a simple formula: overwhelming strength applied to weaker species. They had superior technology, yes, but most of it was inherited from ancient precursor civilizations. The Vrelnath themselves hadn't invented anything truly new in centuries. They didn't need to. They were already strong enough, but humans were different. Humans built, they invented, they improved. Their technology advanced at a rate that seemed almost impossible. The database showed their progression from primitive chemical rockets to interstellar drives happened in less than 200 years. Species normally took thousands of years to make that leap. What would humans be capable of in another 100 years? Another 1,000? Velrax ran a simulation on his terminal, feeding in human technological growth rates and projecting forward. The results made his sensory appendages twitch with alarm. If humans maintained their current pace of innovation, they would surpass Vrelnath military technology within 3 generations. Maybe less if they were motivated by conflict. And the Vrelnath Empire, by capturing their ships and testing their prisoners, had just given humanity a very good reason to be motivated. The commander made a decision. He activated his communication system and sent an urgent request for a secure channel to High Command. While he waited for the connection, he composed his report. It took him an hour to write, choosing every word carefully. The essence was simple. Humanity was not a species to be enslaved or slowly conquered. They were either to be completely eradicated immediately or left alone entirely. There was no middle ground. Any prolonged conflict would only give humans time to adapt, to innovate, to find ways to fight back. And if the Vrelnath Empire started a war with humanity, Velrax believed they might win the battles but eventually lose the war. Because humans would turn everything into weapons. They would never stop trying. They would never accept defeat. The communication channel opened. A senior officer from High Command appeared on the screen, their armor plating marked with the symbols of high rank. Commander Velrax, your request for emergency communication has been noted. What is so urgent? I need to recommend immediate policy changes regarding the human species, Velrax said. I have new intelligence that suggests our current approach is dangerously flawed. The discussion lasted 30 minutes. Velrax presented his findings, showed the footage from the arena, explained his concerns. The High Command officer listened with growing interest. Your recommendation is to release the prisoners and avoid further conflict? The officer asked. Yes, sir. We should establish a border agreement and maintain it strictly. No raids, no tests, no provocations. Let humanity develop in their own space. Monitor them from a distance, but do not engage. That seems like weakness, the officer observed. It's strategic wisdom, Velrax countered. The Vrelnath Empire has survived by knowing which battles to fight and which to avoid. This is one to avoid. There was a long pause. Then the officer nodded slowly. Your report will be forwarded to the council. In the meantime, you have authorization to release the human prisoners as a gesture of diplomatic restraint. The channel closed. Velrax sat back, feeling the tension drain from his body. It was done. He had made his case. Whether the council would listen remained to be seen, but at least he had tried. He picked up the sharpened toothbrush one more time, studying it in the dim light. Such a simple thing, but it represented something much larger, a philosophy, a way of thinking that made humans dangerous in ways the Vrelnath had never encountered before. Better to let them go and hope they remembered this mercy. 12 hours later, Daehyun and the other 3 prisoners were escorted to an escape pod bay. They walked in silence, not quite believing what was happening. No explanation had been given. Guards had simply opened their cells and told them to follow. The escape pod was small but functional. Basic life support, emergency rations, and a navigation computer with coordinates already programmed in. The coordinates led to the nearest human outpost, a military station called Arcturus Base. As they climbed into the pod, Commander Velrax appeared in the bay doorway. He looked at the 4 humans, his sensory appendages scanning them one final time. You are being released, he said simply. Tell your people that the Vrelnath Empire recognizes human territory claims in this sector. We will maintain the current borders and expect you to do the same. Why? Captain Sora asked, her voice suspicious. Why let us go? Velrax was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his armor and pulled out the sharpened toothbrush. He held it up so they could all see it. Because of this, he said. Because a human looked at a piece of plastic and saw a weapon. Because you don't give up. Because you adapt. Because fighting your species would cost more than the Vrelnath Empire is willing to pay. He tossed the toothbrush to Daehyun, who caught it reflexively. Take it, Velrax said. Show it to your leaders. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that the Vrelnath Empire chooses to respect humanity not because you are strong now, but because of what you will become. The pod door sealed. Moments later, it ejected from the Crimson Dominion and began its journey toward human space. Inside the pod, the 4 prisoners sat in stunned silence. Then Hyun started laughing. Just a little at first, then harder until tears ran down his face. The others joined in, the tension and fear of weeks in captivity finally breaking. We did it, Jisoo said, wiping her eyes. We actually survived. More than that, Sora corrected, looking at the toothbrush in Daehyun's hands. We made them afraid. Not much, maybe, but enough. Daehyun studied the weapon he had created. It had saved their lives, but not in the way he expected. It hadn't been used in combat. Instead, it had been used to send a message. A message about human capability, about human determination, about human refusal to accept defeat. What do we do with it when we get back? Hyun asked. Give it to command, Sora said immediately. Let them put it in a museum or something. It's part of history now. The toothbrush that made an empire blink. The pod traveled through space, moving away from the Vrelnath ship and toward safety. On the Crimson Dominion, Commander Velrax watched it go on his monitors. He had made his choice. He had released humanity's representatives and recommended peaceful coexistence. Time would tell if the High Command agreed with his assessment. Time would tell if humanity remembered this mercy or saw it as weakness. But Velrax suspected he had made the right choice. Because species that survived by adaptation didn't forget. They learned. They remembered. They planned, and the Vrelnath Empire had just taught humanity exactly where the Vrelnath boundaries were and what their ships looked like. If war ever did come, The humans would be ready. They would have studied this encounter, learned from it, adapted to it. They would have turned this experience into knowledge and knowledge into weapons. Velrax just hoped that day never came. Because if it did, he suspected the galaxy would discover that the real danger wasn't human weapons. It was human creativity, and that was something no armor could defend against. The first hour was the hardest. Daehyun's fingers ached from gripping the toothbrush, and his shoulder burned from the repetitive motion of scraping plastic against concrete. The handle was tough, designed to withstand daily use without breaking. That durability made it good for a weapon, but terrible for shaping. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The sound became a rhythm. Every 30 strokes, Daehyun paused to examine his progress. The handle was beginning to flatten on one side, the plastic slowly wearing away. It wasn't much, but it was something. "You're doing it wrong." Hyun's voice came through the wall. The young engineer sounded worried. "At that rate, you'll barely make a dent before time runs out." Daehyun stopped and caught his breath. "I'm open to suggestions." "The plastic has a melting point," Hyun explained, his voice quick with nervous energy. "When you scrape it, you're generating friction heat. That heat softens the plastic temporarily. If you scrape in short, fast bursts instead of long, steady strokes, you can reshape it while it's soft and then let it cool in the shape you want." It made sense. Daehyun adjusted his technique. Instead of long scrapes, he did quick, rapid ones, 10 or 15 strokes, then stopped to shape the heated plastic with his fingers before it cooled. It hurt. The hot plastic burned his fingertips, but he gritted his teeth and worked through the pain. The progress improved immediately. The handle started to take on a new shape, one end becoming narrower and more pointed. "That's better," Jisoo said from her cell. "But you need to think about angles. I've been a combat medic for 5 years, which means I know anatomy. Vrelnath anatomy specifically. I've treated human soldiers who fought them in the border skirmishes." "What do I need to know?" Daehyun asked, continuing his work. "Their armor looks solid, but it has weak points," Jisoo explained. "Between the plates there are gaps. The joints especially. Their neck has a vulnerable spot where the head connects to the body. There's a gap in the armor at their armpits where the upper arms connect to the torso. And their eyes aren't protected by the chitin." She paused, then continued. "But here's the thing. Those are small targets, and you're not going to get multiple chances to strike. Whatever you make needs to be able to penetrate deep with a single thrust. That means you need a sharp point and a strong shaft that won't bend or break on impact." Daehyun looked at his work so far. The point was getting sharper, but Jisoo was right. It needed to be perfect. He adjusted his angle, making the taper more gradual so the point would be stronger. 2 hours passed. The toothbrush was transforming. One end had become a wicked spike, ground down to a sharp point. Daehyun tested it against his thumb and immediately drew blood. Good. It was sharp, but now he faced a new problem. The other end, where the bristles were, was awkward to hold. His hand kept slipping during his practice thrusts. If he actually had to use this in a fight, he might lose his grip. "Use your uniform." Captain Sora's voice came from down the corridor. She had been quiet until now, watching and listening. "You need a grip. Tear strips from your clothes and wrap them around the handle. It'll give you better control." Daehyun hesitated. "They'll see me destroying uniform. That might violate some rule." "They asked you to make a weapon," Sora countered. "They can't complain when you actually do it. Besides, they're watching everything anyway. Might as well give them a show of human resourcefulness." She was right. Daehyun grabbed the bottom hem of his jumpsuit and tore. The fabric was tough, but he managed to rip off several long strips. He wrapped them around the middle section of the toothbrush, between the sharpened point and the bristle end, creating a grip. He tied the strips tight and tested it. Much better. His hand no longer slipped. "Now the other end," Hyun said. "The bristle part. It's just dead weight right now." Daehyun examined the bristled end of the toothbrush. The engineer was right. It served no purpose in its current state. But maybe he could change that. He held the bristled end over the small heat vent in his cell's washroom unit. The vent put out warm air as part of the environmental system. It wasn't very hot, but it was enough. The plastic bristles began to soften and melt together. Daehyun shaped them with his fingers, pressing them into a flat disc that would act as a guard, preventing his hand from sliding forward onto the blade during a thrust. 3 hours gone. Halfway through his time limit. The weapon was taking shape, but Daehyun knew it wasn't enough to just have a sharp object. He needed to understand how to use it. He needed tactics. "Captain Sora," he called out. You said you're a veteran. You fought the Vrelnath before. Ground combat twice, Sora confirmed. Both times were ugly. They're bigger, stronger, and faster than humans. In a straight fight, we lose. But they have weaknesses beyond the physical ones Jisoo mentioned. What kind of weaknesses? Psychological, Sora said. The Vrelnath have been dominant for so long that they don't expect real resistance. They expect prey to run or beg. When something fights back effectively, it confuses them. They hesitate. That hesitation is your opening, she continued, her voice taking on the tone of a teacher. Don't attack where they expect. Don't go for the obvious targets first. Feint high, strike low. Make them think you're afraid, then attack when they relax. Use their size against them. They're tall and their center of gravity is high. In close quarters, that's a disadvantage. Daehyun practiced the movements in his small cell. Thrust, withdraw, change angle, thrust again. His muscles learned the patterns. The weapon became an extension of his arm. 4 hours, 5 hours. The toothbrush didn't look like a toothbrush anymore. It looked like exactly what it was, a shank. Prison weapon. The kind of thing that humans had been making for thousands of years in captivity. Sharp, simple, deadly. But as Daehyun worked, something else was happening. He began to understand what this really meant. The weapon wasn't just about the physical object in his hand. It was about what that object represented. Do you know what you've done? Jisoo asked quietly during the 6th hour. You've reminded them of something they forgot. What's that? That humans are dangerous. Not because we're strong or fast or have natural weapons, but because we think, we adapt. We take whatever we have, no matter how useless it seems, and we turn it into something that helps us survive. Hyun added his own thoughts. Every species the Vrelnath have conquered probably had claws or venom or thick hides. They knew what to expect. But humans, we keep surprising them. We use tools. We make fire. We build machines. 1,000,000 years ago, our ancestors were prey animals on Earth, getting eaten by everything with bigger teeth. Now we're traveling between stars. That didn't happen because we were the strongest. It happened because we were the smartest. Captain Sora finished the thought. That toothbrush shank isn't just a weapon, Daehyun. It's a message. It's you telling the Vrelnath that they should have killed us when they had the chance, because if they let us live, we'll find a way to fight back. Always. The 6 hours ended. Daehyun stood in the center of his cell, the completed weapon in his hand. It was crude by any standard. A sharpened piece of plastic with fabric wrapped around the middle. In a proper fight, it would probably break after 1 or 2 uses, but it existed. He had taken a toothbrush and made it dangerous. The force field deactivated. The same guards as before entered and grabbed him. They saw the weapon in his hand but didn't take it away. They had their orders. Daehyun was supposed to bring it to the arena. As they dragged him through the corridors again, Daehyun heard Jisoo call out behind him. Show them what humans can do. Make them respect us, Hyun added. Captain Sora's voice was calm and confident. You've got this, Corporal. Remember your training. Remember you're not alone. The guards pulled Daehyun through the final door. The arena opened before him again, filled with even more Vrelnath observers than before. Word had spread through the ship. Everyone wanted to see if the human had actually done it. Commander Velrax waited in the center, massive and imposing. Daehyun walked forward on his own power this time. The guards let him go and retreated to the edges. He stood before the Vrelnath commander, the shank held loosely in his right hand. 6 hours have passed, Velrax announced to the watching crowd. The human made a claim. Now we see if that claim was truth or desperate lies. The arena fell silent. Hundreds of alien eyes focused on Daehyun and the simple weapon he carried. This was the moment. Everything depended on what happened next.